Welcome into Real Biz. I am your host, Bubba Startz, and with me today, author of the Dancing Wolfman, Rick London. Rick, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bubba. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I am very happy to have you on today. We're going to talk about this amazing book that you've written and the evolution of that into even more great content for us to consume. But before we get into that, really we just want to get a little bit of your backstory, and then we'll pick the conversation up from there.
Sure. So the backstory is uh, how I got the idea for the book was from a memory back of Super Bowl in 1998. I went to go visit a friend. It was January 25th. Drove through this beautiful country road. At the time, it's more developed now, but it was just cow pastures, rolling hills. It was very green. Once saw the Super Bowl, on the way back, it was dark and low cloud cover, foggy. The light posts were few and far between. It looked like a perfect setting for a werewolf ambush. Meet a werewolf, it was perfect. And that memory stayed with me until about a year and a half ago. I was talking with some friends on a Friday night about old friends, and I remember my friend that I saw the Super Bowl with, and I'm like, I hope he's doing okay. And then that memory came back to me about the drive back and how that eerie setting, perfect werewolf ambush right there, and it just stuck with me, and it kept coming up, and I'm like, you know what, I need to do something with this. And I wanted to do some videos first, and I couldn't make that work just like I wanted. So I switched gears and I said, hey, let me write a book. Why not write a book? I love reading. I'm an avid reader. I read every night. I love I love hardboiled detective stories, spy thrillers, adventures, even romance here and there, just good books. And I said, you know what, let me give a shot at writing the book. I believe from all the reading that I've done that I could do something like this. And so slowly started the process, and then got the book done right at the end of Halloween last year, because my book has a Halloween setting toward right at the end there. So I'm like, that's when I wanted to come out. And I wanted to continue doing the book, but I said, no, let me get something out. Let me do a volume one to introduce the readers to this protagonist that I came up with, this werewolf who doesn't become a killer. Instead, he becomes a savior because of the power of music. So, which I'll talk a little bit more in a bit, but that's pretty much the premise of how I came up with the story, just from a good memory.
Yeah, well, and as often as it is with creatives, I'm a songwriter, Rick. So for me, there's always a seed. There's something that has happened, and whether that was, a heartbreak or some triumphant moment out there, it becomes that inception point. And sometimes, it can come out in a rush all at once and be, from inspiration to completion in a very short amount of time. Or as in this case, it could sit around for, almost 20 years inside of
Mhm.
your head, and another spark of inspiration brings that memory back. I love that this one's kind of lived with you, and that singular memory has spurned on, now the book, and a lot more to come from that. Obviously, more books in tow, as there's so many different storylines you can take with the basis that you've now established.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Um, Inspiration from somewhere I had no idea it was coming, but I'm glad for my memory. I'm glad that stuff stays in. And you had mentioned about songwriting. I love all music. That's why I had to use music as a gimmick for my story, right? The power of music to help Titus stay who he is while he's a wolfman. Because I love music, and as I've grown up, I've come to love all music. And I love blues too. I love blues. Blues music. A lot of people say, "Oh, comes from a lot of hard feelings, a lot of breakups, but losses." Uh, but blues is great music. Rock. I just love all music. I think music comes from a lot of inspirational moments, right? Um, I think the human condition when we come up with something is because of something in our life, right? That's what inspires us, or somebody else's moments, and we look at that and we're like, hey, you know what? What's going on with me? What can I do with that? Well, how does that pertain to my life? And then bingo, right? So we all inspire each other in some way or another.
Like, that couldn't be more true, Rick. And I feel that even more so now, as I've done, over 1,000 interviews with mainly artists, but also business owners and and people from all walks of life, that every interview that I do inspires me in some way. Not all of them become books or movies or stories even, but it definitely inspires me to be a little bit better of a person every day. That's why I admire someone like you that took the time to not just have the inspiration, but to chase it down. So I'd love to hear about, the process of writing as someone who took a little bit of time in the winter of 2024 to just sit and grind out and to write a manuscript. Now I haven't published that officially yet, although I do have it available, on my website and have put it out there for other people to consume. The process of writing and publication can be a grueling process, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. With me, that when we talked about our friends that night, it took me about 4 months to come up with the idea, with the outline. And then I always like sharing this. The other inspiration for the music came from, I love music, like I mentioned, but also my son was learning to play the trombone from his friend. And right behind me in that wall, he came home and he would leave the case there. And I was thinking of a gimmick to make my story work. I kept looking at that trombone case, and then bingo, the light went on, right? I'm like, hey, music, let's do it. And then let me incorporate that in the story and make it the strength of the part, I guess, the theme of the story. And as I kept writing, and the other thing, I've never written a story before, and I've never taken any writing course or anything. So I kept writing it, and then I would, every time I added a chapter, I would go back to, I would read it from the beginning, from the prologue to whatever chapter I just added. So I wanted to make sure it flowed. And I didn't learn that for anyone. It's just, it made sense to me. I think that just came from reading so many books over the years. So I just kept going back and kept adding the chapter, read it back from the beginning. So I've read my book, at least 30 times, make sure it flowed. And then I still had to make some changes in the past several months. There's some stuff I wanted to add in there, which I was able to do. And then I also brightened up my book cover. My book cover, the original version, was a little too dark. So when people would order it and they print it, it was, it looked like it was really dark, right? And I'm like, it looks okay, but I'd like it to be a little brighter, especially the moon and the Golden Gate Bridge and the light and everything. And so I did that, and then just added. But it came out. Finished it right around Halloween last year, and the whole goal was to get it out right around the holidays and all that. But unfortunately, I didn't have a pre-launch happen with my publishers. A few things didn't go, so that's fine. But it's out now, and then now I'm just talking about it, getting on shows and doing my marketing, and that's the real process. A lot of I hear I've read a lot of stories and hear from people. Yeah, the book is sometimes really hard, especially when you get stuck. But once you write the book, the book's not going to sell itself, right? Make your own luck. Got to go out there and do everything you can to get people to recognize it, because there's so many books written. I mean, I hear there's like over 200 books written, published every day, right? And I don't look at it that I'm competing against those books. I'm not competing against those books. I'm competing against myself. I'm competing. It's like, what am I going to do? Am I going to sit here and be a couch potato, or am I going to do the work and let people find out about my book and then talk about it and get their, pique their interest, so they could say, hey, it's like, hey, I want to check this book out. It sounds real fascinating. So that's the process.
Think books are tough. Try being a podcaster, Rick.
Yeah. I've heard that takes yeah. I mean, you do a great job, but yeah, I was considering doing a podcast, but there's so many podcasts, and then it takes a long time to get it going, right? But
Well,
that's
and
like anything else.
Rick, and I think what people forget, that just like just like you're not competing against the other authors, your podcast could be an extension of the book itself, right? And of this series of books now, where you can take people a little bit deeper into, you know, your not just maybe process, but the story that maybe didn't make it into the book, right? Themes that you were chasing and things that were turning that almost happens, right? The things that do that maybe become that. So I think there's an avenue for you there to create. And what I see a podcast as an extension of that marketing plan. It's a piece of the marketing plan, not just guesting on others like you are here today and having that content production, you know, like we do here on Real Biz, but it's also a way with your own to be able to take readers and your community on this journey that they're not getting inside of the pages. And I think that's a little bit of a forgotten thing with people when they think about podcasting. Is it's not just about you know, my style is different. I enjoy interviewing others and having that, but maybe one day I'm creating a podcast about my songs and the inspiration behind these songs and taking people on a journey. Great example of this. And I know you're a bit of a music guy, but I'm a huge Smashing Pumpkins fan. So when Billy Corgan released his latest album as the Smashing Pumpkins called 33, that he did an entire podcast cataloging each story. And because each song, because the album was this massive, pretty much a novel, right? In song form, and this huge story that he's been crafting for 30 years of his music career. And now with each episode, they were cataloging each song and the story behind each song as it pertained to the grander story. So it was a really cool format for me to watch that and to listen to this story and the way that they were able to extrapolate the moments from each individual 3 to 5 minute song and to make it into a 30 or 45 minute podcast with anecdotes in there and everything. So something to think about, for not just for yourself, but for other writers that are out there and considering it. Not every podcast has to be the same. We're not all Joe Rogan.
No. You know, that's a great idea. I didn't think about that. And also, I think it would be great to talk with other authors. And I've thought about that. It's just I haven't really been inspired to do it, but I can see doing it and talk to other Wolfman authors, right? Talk about Wolfman lore and even bring up other famous monsters, right? The vampire, Frankenstein, and other ones, and just talk to people about that, because there's so many people that love that stuff, right? They love there's like communities of vampire lovers, community of werewolf lovers, and just talk about that. And yeah, get in there stuff that wasn't necessarily put in the book, and just other ideas that pop up. So that's thank you for that. That's a great idea.
Yeah,
And,
inspiration.
I'm learning
Rick.
I'm learning. You inspired me. Something to learn. You know, I'm learning.
Well, and when you need help with the production side, you know a guy now, right?
You got it. You got it.
I love something that you just touched on there that we often overlook, because the monsters, quote unquote, right, of these books are often the heroes of that, or the anti-hero of these stories. There's so many storylines inside of these monsters, right, that they're all a little bit the same, right? The fur or the fangs may look different, but I think a lot of the themes are very similar. It allows us to step into you know, different characters and different sets of human emotions, right? And I think that's the interesting part about the, you know, kind of monster movie and the themes, is that while the action may be the same, the chases or the hunts or whatever it may be, a lot of those themes are similar, but the different range of the human emotions and things that can be evoked from that. Because I think when any of us are readers or movie watchers, you know, consumers of the content, that we're always looking to find a little bit of ourselves inside of that. And I think we each identify with maybe a different monster over the other for the qualities of theirs that we may see in ourselves. And you know, I think there's the Jekyll and Hyde of a Wolfman, that they only change it, that a vampire only coming out at night, but always being hungry for more. That there's so many different themes to play inside of there. And yeah, exactly. The consumer, I think, is attracted to them because they see a bit of themselves inside of that character.
Absolutely. Those are great points. I believe I've been asked that before, right? It's like, do you see yourself being in the book? Are you Titus Wolf? I'm like, yeah, in so many ways I am, yeah. And the main premise of the book, the music transforming his consciousness back to himself while he's a wolfman. I kind of wrote the book as a metaphor, right? Here's a guy, he's a morally grounded guy, and when he becomes a werewolf, and werewolf stories pretty much follow the same arc, right? Becomes a vicious killer and then gets hunted. But I changed it because of music and because of who he is. And he's not a killer. So when he becomes a werewolf, he has to decide. It's like he doesn't know how to kill. That's not his instincts. So instead he becomes a protector. And I didn't make him, my intent was not to make him into a superhero, made him to somebody, like you said, people could relate to, right? Here's a guy who becomes a werewolf, but inside of him, inside that fur and the muscles and all that, is a human being. And he has to figure out what he's going to do with this new, it might seem like a curse, but it's more like a power, right? More like a blessing. What's he going to do? Is he gonna act the same way? Is he going to stick to his guns, stick to his morals of who he is? Or is he going to become, a monster and succumb to the primal instincts of a killer? And I wanted to change that because I love werewolf stories and I love all the transformations and the killing and all that. I always mention this, Bubba. Part of when I was talking about in the beginning, the that the memory of driving down that road, it reminded me of the beginning of a movie called An American Werewolf in London. I don't know if you've ever seen it, right? It's my favorite werewolf movie. It's about 40 years old now, over 40 years old. Yeah, about 45 now for 46. But it's that the werewolf in that movie, he's vicious, he's terrible, he just tears people to pieces, right? And so I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do a different, and I didn't want to make it a superhero movie. I wanted to make it just an average guy blessed with a superpower, but he decides to stick to who he is, sort of like us, right? When we're presented with certain moments where we could become, not the you know there's a lot of good people in the world, right? That we all have our bad moments, we all have our good moments, right? So, but when presented with an intense situation, do we act like an ass? My apologies if I offended anyone. Or do we act like the person that we are? When presented with the moment, we keep our cool, our composure, and we stick to who we are. So that's kind of like the metaphor I wrote in the book. So yeah, it is a werewolf movie, but it makes you think, right? It makes you go deep in yourself. It's like, hey, I like this. So it's like makes me think of who, what I would do, if I ever come to a situation like that. And we all do, right? At work, our personal relationships, events, stuff like that. Stuff happens, but that wasn't my intent though, Bubba. It's just as I wrote the book, it just came out, and at the end when I kept reading, I'm like, hey, I got an interesting angle here. So I hope people get inspired from that.
Well, and that kind of brings me to a question, because I know with songs, it often feels like I'm just harnessing something that was already out there, and I'm more of a conduit for the song, and that spark of inspiration has begun the process, but I have very little to do with it actually getting done. Do you feel in some ways that the book wrote itself, and that the themes kind of played out the way that they were going to, and that you didn't necessarily have to force things into that it just kind of happened naturally as the writing was taking place?
Oh man, just what I was thinking. Yeah, absolutely. Um, the first three chapters, I didn't have a struggle, but I had to figure out how to boot and then how to put it together. And then after that, you're right. It just came out naturally. It just flowed, right? And then I just made little tweaks here and there, added stuff later, but pretty much the rest of the story was just it just came out like that. Um, and Man, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I didn't get stuck. It's like, oh my God, how would I do it? Because in the beginning, when I was writing, I had my outline and everything, but you know, I've heard with writers, even though they have an outline and a plan, as they get writing, things change all the time, right? And they're like, oh man, I don't like this, so I'm gonna change it. But what am I gonna change it to? With me, it just kept coming out, and it just made sense. And I believe, Bubba, what helped is going back and starting from the beginning each time I added a chapter to it. And I think because of that, because I kept reading and everything just kept making sense and flowed, then the rest just kept coming, just like you said, just came out natural.
Do you feel that not being someone who's classically trained writer, I guess probably not the right word, but someone who went to school for writing and was taught how to write, that you really are teaching yourself how to write by being just a big fan of reading, and then bringing that love and passion for reading to the writing process? Do you feel like that, not necessarily an advantage necessarily, but that it gives you a little bit different take on it than someone who, went and spent 4 years getting a degree in creative writing may have?
Maybe, maybe that's an interesting point because if you go to school and you take a course, everything you learn is like, okay, I got to apply these techniques to my writing, right? And then your writing's like, no, I messed up. I'm not applying what I learned. And maybe maybe your story gets diluted, or it's not what you want because you're sticking to the things that you've learned, and instead of being yourself and letting just the story come out naturally. So perhaps I perhaps it is an advantage, right? Because I don't have any experience in writing, and then all of a sudden it just comes out from all the ideas that I've gotten from reading all these great books over the years. And I'm not a bad writer. I don't consider myself a great writer, but maybe right there in the middle. But yeah, I believe it's just from all the books that I read and all the ideas that I got from them. So that doesn't mean that, if I took a course that I'd be really rigid and, sticking to all the techniques and everything that I applied, because maybe I would have come up with a different way to write and different ideas. And I believe the book would have still, it would have still worked, but I just had to go with what I have, and it worked out. So hopefully it'll work out even better as more exposure comes. But yeah, that's an interesting point. I've never thought about it like that, but um,
Well, it's hard to
there's,
put a book. It's hard to put a book into a box when you don't know the parameters of the box in the first place,
I
and
think
and it
so.
allows
Yeah.
you to be very free as a creator and in that creative process when you're not putting constraints on yourself that, oh, it needs to be this amount of words, or it needs, chapters can only be so long, or I can't do this. Like, you're coming in with this kind of a can-do attitude, right? You're not putting
Mhm,
any limitations on yourself from
mhm,
Jump Street, which I think are inherent in if you are trained by someone else and you are taking these courses, that you are inherently putting kind of limitations on yourself. And I know every teacher is different in that, and some people can be, open up new doors to you. But I think there is a little bit, because I've never been classically trained in music whatsoever, and I think that it just gives me a different perspective because it's not altered by anyone else's lens.
yeah, true, true. Um, I read an article during during the time I was writing the book that this guy selling the course that about 80 or so percent of the population would like to write a book, right? But only 1% of that 80% actually writes a book. And then even in that 1%, even though a lot of books get published every day, a lot of people get stuck. And uh, who knows what the reasons are? They just can't, they get stuck on the idea and all that. With me, the way with my thinking process, if I had taken a course, I probably would have got stuck because I would have been doing it from the point of, okay, this is how I learned how to do it, stick to it. And since I had no training or whatever, I'm fortunate that it came out the way it did. It's like there was no barriers. for me to get stuck on. It just the only thing that I got stuck on was just the beginning, and then after that. So actually, for me, the way I am, the way I work, actually, it worked out just fine, you know. But there's a lot of great writers that are classically trained, and they've come out with some great books, right? There's so many of them, right? And I think too, when you do two courses, um, I think the process might even take a little longer because the lens that you're proofreading your work is I would say it's broader, right? Because you look at things from every angle. Uh, you know, with me, I wasn't looking at it in so many angles. It just came out the way it did. But you know, it works both ways. I think both ways were great. If if presented to me to take a course, hey, I'll consider it. Just like you came up with, you know, doing the podcast, right? I'm a pretty open-minded guy. It's like, hey, whatever can help me become a better storyteller. Absolutely. You know, I would take it.
You touched on something at the beginning that you probably could have kept writing, but because you had the Halloween time frame for the release, and even though it hurts you in the marketing side and being able to actually get it out there and go, I think that you touched on something interesting there that sometimes it's best to just do something and create it and finish it rather than trying to finish it perfectly. Because I think that's also where a lot of people can get stuck at is that, well, it's not perfect yet. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. You can always do another volume, or you can elaborate on that idea further and maybe revise it and re-release the book in the future when you have that. But I think so many people get paralyzed by trying to finish a perfect product rather than just finishing a product and releasing it.
Absolutely. You know, that's the point I wanted to make earlier. I think a lot of people get stuck. It's like, oh no, my book has to be perfect. Well, you got to look at it at the point of view of the reader, right? If you're looking at a book and you like it so far, but it's not perfect, how would the reader look at your book? Would they still enjoy your story? Does your story make sense? Does do you have character development? Does the story flow? Do you have great moments in there where people like really, you know, aha moments? Did you leave a cliffhanger? Did you have a good ending? It does. Your no book has to be perfect. It's just you have to put yourself in the eyes of the reader, the person who's going to read your book and get inspiration and be satisfied. It's like, hey, that was, you know, that was time well spent reading this book, right? And yeah, it's like that's another thing why people don't finish their books. They start and then it's like they keep throwing the paper away, or just, you know, they throw their, well, now it's not even paper, right? They throw their laptop somewhere, right? Because they get so frustrated, right? Then they have to go buy another laptop, right? But yeah, it's like, yeah, because a lot of us are perfectionists too, right? Especially when we want to create something where we're creators and we want to bring something out to the world, and it's like, and you feel it's like, oh no, this is not going to work. Well, you don't know that. The good thing that one thing I didn't do, Bubba, but that I should have, as I'm gonna do it as I when I do volume two, is I'm gonna have people read it in as it progresses, right? So to make sure that the story flows not just from my perspective, but from the reader's perspective. And so I believe for out there, for the people who are listening to this podcast, if you're a creator and you're writing a book and you're stuck, you know what? Put in the eyes of someone else. See how they feel about it. See if it flows for them, and then take their ideas and just work from that, right?
Yeah, incredible points. Well, and Rick, before I let you go today, and I want to, you know, tell everybody where they can find the book, dancingwolfeman.com. Wolfman is WOLFEMAN. And but I know that you've sent the book off and now have a screenplay from this and hoping to, you know, create this into a feature film as well, whether that be a short film or, you know, kind of a full length feature to be seen and to be determined yet. But I was interested in, I know that you kind of left it open-ended where, okay, we'll do volume two. Was that something that, you know, halfway through the process, you knew that there was going to be more stories to tell for the character, or was it something as you're getting to the end and wanting to release it that you're like, look, we can tell more of the stories and extrapolate more from this in the future, and setting sights on a volume 2?
No, that came early on. I knew there was more, because the one thing, the main thing about my book is my protagonist doesn't die, and none of the other main characters die. So it's a continuation of that story. I just wanted to do volume 1 just because of the Halloween thing coming up, and I wanted to get it out there. And I actually have at least 4 books that I'd like to get published from this, and even maybe later on down the line, I get somebody I can collaborate, some artists. I'd like to do also graphic novels, right? Because a werewolf's an action figure, right? And graphic novels are great, right? With the drawings and all the captions, and the make the motion and everything. I think it would be a great graphic novel. And my other 4 books, aside from the graphic novels, would be volume 2, of course, the continuation. And then I want to do an origins and go deep in the Wolfman lore, where it originated from, and put that into the story with my protagonists and their group. And then also want to do 2 prequels, one for his love interest and her life, her interesting life, leading up to where she meets Titus. And then Everett Kane, is another main character in the book, a guy that looks like an antagonist, but because of what happens, because of who Titus is as a Wolfman, he becomes his ally. And then have a prequel of him and his interesting life leading up to where they meet Titus, right? And this is the trio. These are the main characters right there. And then just continue it from there.
I love how a singular moment driving home from a Super Bowl has become an entire franchise now. You have it all, the graphic novels and the series of books and movies and everything that will go along with this. If you could go back in time to 1998 and to, having lived it all now, did you ever think that singular memory and maybe that vision of the Wolfman on the side of the road as you're driving through the night and the rolling hills with the cow pastures, could you have ever dreamed that it would have gotten to this point?
No, not at all. But I'm glad that memory stuck with me. I have a good memory. I have a lot of good memories of my life, and who knows what other memories that I have from my life, might come to fruition, right? Might come to other stories, and again, I believe people who write in artists and all that, sculptures, paintings, create videos. Those people get inspired by special moments in their lives. I'm surely no different than anyone else, but yeah, I had no inkling that something like that would create something, but I'm grateful it did. So.
Well, and I think so much of what is learned is the process, and through learning processes by which you write, or making, building relationships with, publishers and screenwriters and all of these people, that eventually it gets easier and easier because you're repeating the same process, and the stories really just start to take care of themselves. And it's in learning and having the courage to begin the process, and the wherewithal and the perseverance to learn and perfect processes that really make, a guy like a Stephen King or something, who's written, I don't even know how many novels at this point, that you don't get there without a great bit of grit and determination to see things through. And as you get better at the processes, that it becomes inherently easier as you go. And I think as you build this franchise, and whether it, we build a podcast out of it and the movies and everything, that eventually what you build is a community and a fan base, if you want, of readers and people who are now invested in these stories as much as you are. And now it not becomes something necessarily for yourself, but it becomes something for the readers who want to see more, who begin to see more and more of themselves, whether it's in Titus or the love interest or someone inside of this story. And maybe there's spin-off stories that come from all of it, as you've alluded to with the prequel stuff. I love that you have a massive vision for this. As someone who has big visions himself, it always inspires me to work with others and to get to meet people that are doing, maybe in different industries and completely different storylines, but the passion is the same.
Yeah, no, I'm excited, Bubba. I'm excited for this universe, and it's still in its early stages, I would consider it. I've been told that it takes my book got published, it was published on December 9th last year. I've been told by several people that it takes a while for a book to really get recognized and out there. It takes about a year, 2 year and a half. And so in the beginning, like early this year after after it was published, I was like, oh man, nothing's happening, nothing's happening. And then I kept doing some research and reading articles about it. And it's like, you know what? Be patient. Do what I have to keep doing, you know, uh, build my community, meet a lot of interesting people who've done it before me. Uh, and I love being on podcasts. I think this podcast is great. You've been a great host, and I love talking about it. I think podcast is a great medium to get some recognition and build your credibility and your brand, and just keep doing what I'm doing, right? Just grind away, right? This is a marathon. This is not a one time, oh, it didn't work, nothing happened the first 6 months. What's the point of continuing? Like, no, it takes a while. It's like, and now with social media and with electronics and software and people's attention span being so short, you got to keep doing different things to get their attention, and use different techniques to garner their attention, and then to hook them and keep them there, right? So it's a learning process, but the one thing I'm learning about this whole thing, Bubba, is just be patient, grind away, keep doing it, and just be patient and do the right things, and build a community, use feedback, and it takes a village, right? It's like, yeah, I wrote it, but I'm not going to get this out by myself. So it's sort of like a long-term collaboration project in a way, right?
Yep, and it'll only get bigger and better as it goes. Rick, I appreciate you coming on the show today. I'm so grateful to have you as a friend out here in the world, creating some really incredible content and a lot more than just a book. You have big visions for where this goes. I hope that us here at Boomz TV as well get to be a part of that eventual movie and whatever that becomes on the visual side. I can't wait to read the book. I hope I got a copy coming in the mail here soon that I'll have a great time reading, and being a part of the process as we get into the the Halloween season. Will be here before we know it, and making it a big marketing push this year in October, and pushing it out there and introducing people to a new character. And I think that while the Wolfman story, and there are many of them out there now, that you've put a different spin on it, and I think that the world is ready for something like that. And I'm so happy to be now a part of this and the lore of Titus and the Dancing Wolfman. Rick, thanks for being a part of the show today, and thank you for being part of the scene.
Bubba, thank you for such a great show, and very grateful, much appreciated. I'm glad you gave me a little window here to tell my story. And one thing I want to tell everybody before we go, it's Bubba's had it at the bottom there. My book's available on all, it's like available on the 16 sites, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple Books. Also, you can buy it on my website too as well. If you go there on the main page, on the homepage at the very top, you'll see a buy button. You could get it there. And one of the things I stress now very much is, please, after you buy the book and read it, please leave go back and leave a review. Those are very important, because it helps other readers discover the book. It helps Google get the book out there when people are searching for a certain type of genre they want to read, like paranormal, romantasy, Wolfman story, or just any good story. So please leave a review. Again, it's not just to help me, but it helps the other readers who want to discover something new. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Well, and once again, that website is Dancing Wolfman. Wolfman is WOLFEMAN.com. You can find the book there. Make sure to follow Rick on the platforms and go buy the book. It's going to be a great read for you. And there's a lot more to come there. So Rick, once again, thank you for being part of the scene.
All right. Thank you for having me, Bubba.